3 years. 1,097 days. That was how long the people closest to Kang Hyun-Seok had been watching his face for something that never came. Not at his father's funeral. Not at the signing that tripled the organization's legitimate holdings. Not at the meeting where he sat across from the 3 men who had ordered his wife's death and looked at them with eyes so cold that 2 of them never came back to another meeting again. Not once. Not a single time in 3 years had anyone seen Kang Hyun-Seok smile. His men had stopped expecting it. His rivals had started using it as a warning. His doctors had written in clinical notes that the patient displayed a flat affect consistent with complicated grief and had then wisely chosen not to say that out loud to his face. And then on a Tuesday afternoon in October, he walked out of his post-operative consultation at Seoul Medical Center and heard music. Not from a speaker. Not from a phone. From a doctor. A black woman in green surgical scrubs was standing alone in the corridor outside the consultation suite, earbuds in, chart tucked under one arm, moving with the specific uninhibited joy of someone who believed entirely and without reservation that nobody was watching. She was wrong. He was watching. And for the first time in 1,097 days, something moved across the face of Kang Hyun-Seok that his most senior aide, standing 4 steps behind him, would describe to 3 different people before the evening was over. He said it looked like a man remembering that the world had warmth in it. Stay with me. Because this is not a story about a smile. This is a story about what happens when the most dangerous man in Seoul decides that the woman who gave him that smile back is worth protecting at any cost. And that decision is going to change everything for both of them. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications because this story has no breaks and you are not going to want to miss a single moment. Now, let's go back to where it all started. Her name was Dr. Amara Mensah, 31 years old. Ghanaian born. Raised in Accra and then London, and then the relentless pressure cooker of medical school where she had finished in the top 4% of her class and done her surgical residency under a consultant who had told her in her first week that she would need to be twice as good as everyone else in the room, and she had looked at him with her large dark eyes and said she was already planning on it. She was not small in presence, though she was slender, 5'6" with deep brown skin that seemed to absorb Seoul's gray winter light and throw it back differently. She had natural hair that she wore in a large protective bun at work and loose and enormous outside of it. Her eyes were her most commanding feature, large and intensely expressive and impossible to lie to, which had caused her significant difficulty throughout medical school and zero regret in actual practice. Her laugh was too loud for the hospital corridors, she had been told, and she had nodded politely and continued laughing exactly as loudly because some feedback was not actionable. She had been at Seoul Medical Center for 14 months on a research fellowship that was, technically speaking, the opportunity of a lifetime. The hospital was among the top 5 facilities in Asia. The cardiothoracic surgery department she worked in had equipment she had only seen in journal photographs during her training. The research she was doing on minimally invasive valve repair techniques was work that genuinely excited her in the way that only a certain kind of person got genuinely excited about cardiothoracic surgery, which was to say completely and without apology. She had one problem with Seoul. She was lonely. Not dramatically. Not in the way of someone who had lost something. In the quieter way of someone who had not yet found the community that made a city feel like home. She had colleagues she respected and a few she liked and none yet that she trusted completely. She had a small apartment in Mapo that she had made comfortable with rugs and plants and the specific stubborn domesticity of a person who refused to feel temporary wherever she was. She had video calls with her mother in Accra on Sundays and with her best friend in London on Thursdays, and she had her music which she carried everywhere and played constantly and danced to in corridors when she believed nobody was looking. She had been wrong about that exactly once. And that once had changed everything. The patient in Suite 4C had been on her surgical list for 6 weeks. He had come through referral from a private clinic with imaging that suggested a calcified aortic valve and a patient history that the referring physician had described in his cover letter as complex in a way that was clearly a professional euphemism for something considerably more specific. The name on the file was Kang H. The age was 38. The preoperative notes described a patient who was cooperative, medically compliant, and had declined general anesthetic for the catheter-based procedure in favor of sedation only, which was unusual, but within clinical parameters, and which Amara had filed under patient preference and moved on. She had not looked him up before the procedure. This was her standard practice. She treated the file first and the person afterward because the file told her what the body needed, and she wanted that assessment clean before the social complexity of the individual entered the equation. She met him on the procedure table. He was tall. Even lying down she could tell. Broad-shouldered. The kind of lean muscular build that came from consistent physical discipline rather than aesthetics. His face was a study in controlled composition, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, the specific quality of settled stillness that she associated with people who had trained themselves not to react to things. His eyes were open. Most patients closed their eyes when the sedation began taking effect. He was watching the ceiling. "I'm Dr. Mensah," she said. "I'll be performing the procedure today. You'll feel the sedation beginning in about 60 seconds. Do you have any questions before we start?" He turned his head and looked at her. The look lasted approximately 4 seconds. "Are you good?" he said. She looked at him. "Exceptionally," she said. Something moved in his eyes. Not humor. The acknowledgement of it. "Good," he said. He turned his eyes back to the ceiling. She performed the procedure. It was technically demanding, and she executed it precisely and without complication in 43 minutes, which was 11 minutes faster than the procedure average for this valve type. She told him this after because she told all her patients their procedure outcomes directly and immediately because she believed that information about your own body belonged to you first. He was sitting upright by then, the sedation wearing off with the brisk efficiency of a body that apparently processed everything quickly. 11 minutes faster than average, he said. "Yes. Is that good? Every additional minute under sedation carries marginal risk. 11 fewer minutes is meaningfully better for the patient. For me. For you," she confirmed. He looked at her again with the same quality of assessment he had used on the table. "Thank you, Dr. Mensah," he said. "The follow-up consultation is in 6 weeks. Please take the medication schedule seriously. The first 4 weeks are critical for the valve's integration." "I take medical instructions seriously," he said. "Good," she said. "Most people don't." She left the suite. She did not think about Kang H. again until the 6-week follow-up, when he walked out of the consultation suite at the precise moment she had one earbud in and her chart under her arm and "Oh My God" by Ciara coming through at a volume that was probably 2 notches louder than professional, and she was moving. She was not dramatically dancing. She was doing the thing she always did in empty corridors, which was a sort of continuous full-body agreement with whatever she was listening to. A rolling shoulder and a step and a hip shift that was somewhere between walking and joy and had no name because she had never needed to name it before because she had always been alone when it happened. She became aware of him the way you became aware of weather. A change in the quality of the air. She turned. He was standing outside the consultation suite door with his jacket over one arm and a folder in his hand, and the expression of someone who had been watching something they had not expected and were still processing what to do with it. Behind him his aide, a compact Korean man in his 40s, was looking at somewhere that was extremely specifically not at Amara. She pulled the earbud out. "Dr. Kang," she said. Then corrected herself. "Mr. Kang." The file had said no professional title. "I was." "Don't stop," he said. She blinked. "On my account," he added, as though that clarified it. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Your follow-up," she said carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Well," he said. "The medication schedule has been followed. Let's confirm that inside." They went back into the consultation suite. She reviewed his numbers. His recovery was exceptional. Textbook adherence to post-procedure protocol. Valve integration precisely on track. She told him all of this in the direct, factual manner she told everyone their results, and he listened with the complete focused attention she was beginning to understand was simply how he listened to things. "No restrictions on physical activity from this point forward," she said. "I'd like to see you in 3 months for a final check unless you have symptoms before then." "Which you won't." "You sound certain." "I am." Your body is in excellent condition and you followed the protocol exactly. The outcome was always going to be good. And if I hadn't followed the protocol, then we'd be having a different conversation. He was quiet for a moment. You dance in empty corridors, he said. It was not an accusation or a question. It was the neutral presentation of a factual observation. I thought it was empty, she said. It was empty, he said. I came out early. She studied him. Mr. Kang, she said. Can I ask you something clinical? Yes. Your referring physician described your history as complex. That's a word people use when they mean something specific and don't want to write it directly. You've been in excellent health otherwise. Your stress markers have been consistently elevated for approximately 3 years based on the imaging history I reviewed. That kind of sustained elevation doesn't come from professional pressure alone. She held his gaze. Are you all right? The consultation room was very quiet. He looked at her for a long moment. That is outside the scope of cardiac follow-up, he said. Yes, she said. It is. Which is why I'm asking it as a person rather than a physician. Another silence. No, he said simply. She nodded. Okay, she said. You don't have to be. But your body is going to keep telling the story regardless of what your face does with it. So at some point it might be worth addressing both. He stood. 3 months, he said. 3 months, she confirmed. He reached the door. Dr. Mensah. Yes. The dancing. A pause. Don't stop doing that. He left. She sat in the consultation chair after the door closed and looked at the blank wall and thought about the specific quality of that silence and what it had contained and told herself it was a clinical observation about a patient's emotional state and nothing more. She believed this for approximately 48 hours. His full name was Kang Hyun-Seok, and she looked him up on the 49th hour. She had resisted for 48 because she had a personal rule about looking up patients beyond what was clinically relevant, and she respected her own rules with the same rigor she applied to everything else. But on the 49th hour, she was eating dinner alone in her apartment, and she typed his name into a search engine, and the results rearranged her understanding of her Tuesday afternoon in a way that was significant. Kang Hyun-Seok, 38. Chief executive of Kang Holdings, which was a legitimate corporation with interests in construction, logistics, and private equity. Also the subject of 3 separate investigative journalism pieces in the last 5 years, none of which had produced any legal action. All of which had circled the same territory with the specific frustration of reporters who knew what they were looking at and could not prove it. She read one of the pieces. Then she read another. Then she sat with her dinner going cold and thought about what it meant that the man whose valve she had repaired was the man these articles were describing, and arrived at the conclusion that it did not change anything clinically and that it complicated everything personally, and that she had a 3-month follow-up appointment on her schedule that she was going to attend as a physician and nothing else. She believed this with approximately 60% conviction. That 60% dropped to 40 on the day he came back. Not for the 3-month appointment. 41 days after the follow-up, he appeared at the hospital during her shift and asked for her at reception, and she was told he was in the lobby, and she went down in her scrubs and her bun and found him standing at the lobby entrance with a single aide and a look that she was beginning to recognize as the version of his face that meant he had something to say and was calculating how to say it. You're not due for 3 months, she said. I know. Is something wrong clinically? No. She waited. I would like to take you to dinner, he said. She looked at him. Mr. Kang. Hyun-Seok, he said. If you are going to tell me no, you should use my name. Hyun-Seok, she said. I am your physician. The procedure is complete. The follow-up is routine monitoring. The clinical relationship is minimal at this point. That is a technically accurate description that is missing significant ethical context. I know, he said. I am asking anyway. She studied him. This man who had not smiled in 3 years, who had watched her dance in a corridor and told her not to stop. Who had answered the question of whether he was all right with a single honest no that had cost him something to say. Who looked at her with the focused, complete attention of someone who had decided something and was prepared to say so directly. She thought about the articles. She thought about gravity. She thought about the 49 hours she had spent not looking him up and the 49th hour when she had. I will have dinner with you once, she said. As 2 people. not as physician and patient. After which I reserve the right to return to the full ethical framework of our professional relationship. Something moved in his eyes. Once, he said. To begin with, she said, and was slightly startled by her own honesty. The corner of his mouth moved. She went back to her shift. She was excellent at her job for the rest of the afternoon and extraordinarily distracted for all of it. The dinner was quiet and specific and nothing like what she had expected. He had chosen a small restaurant in Insadong that she had not heard of, tucked between two larger establishments with no sign above the door and a staff of 3 who clearly knew him and arranged themselves around his presence with the comfortable efficiency of familiarity rather than fear. She had worn a dress. Dark burgundy. Natural hair out and enormous, and she had watched him register it when she walked in the way a person registered something that surprised them pleasantly and was not going to say so directly. They sat across from each other, and he ordered for both of them in Korean and then said, "Unless you have preferences," and she said, "I trust you," and watched something in his face settle at those 3 words. They talked. Not about his business. Not about her research. Not about the procedure or the valve or the 3 years of elevated stress markers. They talked about Accra and what it sounded like at 6 a.m. and how Seoul sounded different at the same hour in a way she was still learning. He told her about a summer in Jeju when he was 9 that was the last uncomplicated summer he could remember. She told him about her grandmother who had taught herself to read at 62 and had subsequently read everything she could find and had opinions about all of it. He listened. Not politely. Actively. The specific quality of attention that meant he was filing what she said rather than waiting for his turn to speak. She noticed he did not eat much. "You should eat," she said. "I eat enough. You eat the minimum required amount, and you know it. Your weight has been stable for 3 years, but the muscle distribution has changed, which means you're maintaining mass through exercise rather than intake." He looked at her. "You can see that from across a table." "I can see that from a chart. Across a table I can see you've had approximately 4 bites in the last 40 minutes. He picked up his chopsticks and ate deliberately, and she bit the inside of her cheek. "The dancing," he said after a moment. "What about it? What were you listening to?" "Oh My God" by Sierra. He was quiet. "I don't know it." She pulled out her phone and played 10 seconds. He listened with the same focused, complete attention. He gave everything. "I understand why you moved to that," he said. "Do you dance?" she asked. "No. That's not a permanent condition." "Isn't it?" "No," she said simply. "It's a choice you're making every day until you make a different one." He looked at her across the restaurant table with the dark eyes and the strong jaw and the face that had been holding itself still for 3 years, and something in his expression shifted the way it had in the corridor when he'd watched her dance. Like a room that had been dark for a long time having one specific window opened. "Amara," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She felt it land. "Yes," she said. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said. "In a car accident that was not an accident." The restaurant was quiet. She did not fill the silence. "I have spent 3 years building toward the people who are responsible," he said. "I am close. And the people who are aware of how close I am are beginning to make decisions about the adjacency risk of people near me." She held his gaze. "You're warning me," she said. "Yes. Before anything has started." "Before anything has started," he confirmed. "Because you deserve that information at the beginning rather than after you're already inside it." She thought about this. "How close are you?" she asked. He was still. "Weeks," he said. "Perhaps days." "And after?" He looked at her. "I don't know what after looks like yet," he said honestly. "I have spent 3 years not thinking about after." She looked at the man across the table from her. At the weight he had been carrying for 1,097 days, pressed into every line of his face and every careful, precise movement. At the honesty of what he had just said and what it had cost him. "I am not afraid of complicated," she said. "You should be." "Hyun-Seok," she said. "I moved from Accra to London to Seoul alone. I performed cardiac surgery in underfunded hospitals in 3 countries during my training. I have been the only person in the room who looked like me in every significant professional context of my career. I have a very clear and well-calibrated understanding of what difficult looks like and what I am capable of handling." She looked at him steadily. "Don't decide that for me. The silence stretched. Then he did something she had not seen before. He smiled. Small. Real. Like something that had been locked away for a very long time, finding a door that was finally open. It transformed his face entirely. She pressed her lips together. "There it is," she said quietly. He looked at her. "There what is?" "The one you've been keeping to yourself for 3 years." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You noticed." "I told you. I notice most things." If this story is doing something to you right now that you were not expecting, I need you to hit that like button right this second and subscribe, because what comes next is going to make everything you have already felt look like the opening act. Drop a comment below telling me who you think sent the car that killed his wife. Because I promise the answer is going to change how you see everything. Now stay with me. The threat arrived 11 days later. Not to him. To her. She found it on a Wednesday morning in her hospital locker. A white envelope with her full name printed on the front in Korean characters. She had learned to read well enough to understand what she was looking at. Inside, a single card. 4 words in English. "Leave Seoul. Now. Please." The please was the most frightening part. She stood in the changing room for 3 minutes. Then she put the card in her pocket and went to do her rounds. She called him at noon. He answered before the second ring. "Someone left something in my hospital locker," she said. The silence on the other end was the specific quality of a man whose temperature had just dropped 20 degrees. "Are you somewhere private?" "Break room. Alone." "Read it to me." She did. 3 seconds of silence. "Do not go home tonight," he said. His voice was the voice she had not heard before, stripped of everything except operational precision. "I am sending someone to the hospital. His name is Park Sung-jin. He is compact, 40s, and he will say your name first. Go with him. Hyun-Seok." Amara. Her name in that voice. "Please." She breathed. "Okay," she said. Park Sung-jin arrived at 2:15 p.m. and said her name first, and she went with him. The place he took her to was a penthouse in Gangnam that was enormous and cold and clearly not lived in as a home, but rather maintained as a functional space, a beautiful fortress with floor-to-ceiling windows showing Seoul from above. She stood at the windows when she arrived and looked at the city and thought about the card in her pocket. He arrived 40 minutes later. He looked different. The careful, composed surface he wore everywhere else was present but different at the edges, pulled tighter, the specific tension of someone managing something that was affecting them more than they wanted it to. "Are you hurt?" he said first. "No." The card was placed inside a secured locker in a controlled area. "Yes." "Which means they have someone in the hospital." "That thought had occurred to me," she said. "Yes." He looked at her. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you at dinner." "Tell me." "The men who ordered my wife's death," he said. "I have been building a case against them through legitimate channels and through other means simultaneously. The legitimate case is 3 weeks from being filed. The other means are further along." He met her eyes directly. "One of the 3 men is Han Chol-soo, who is on the board of Seoul Medical Center." The room was very quiet. "He knows about me," she said. "He found out about dinner. My security believes they have been monitoring my movements for the last 2 months. Which means they have known about your existence in my life since approximately the 7th day after we met." She processed this. "The card said please," she said. "Yes. That's not a threat from someone who wants to hurt me. That's a message from someone who wants me gone without the complications of hurting me." He looked at her. "You read it correctly," he said. "Han is methodical. He prefers removal to confrontation where possible. But methodical men adjust their methods when their timeline is threatened. And your timeline is 3 weeks. So I have 3 weeks of being a variable he wants removed." "Yes." His jaw was tight. "I should have." "Do not finish that sentence with an apology for telling me the truth at dinner," she said. "You told me. I made an informed decision. This is what informed decisions sometimes produce. I am still sorry for it." "You are allowed to be sorry for it," she said. "You are not allowed to decide it was your mistake to make on my behalf." He looked at her with the dark eyes. "What do you want to do?" he said. She turned back to the windows and looked at Seoul below. She thought about Accra. About her grandmother who had taught herself to read at 62 and had said once that the only things worth doing were the ones that scared you correctly. Not the fear that made you small, but the fear that meant something real was at stake. I want to stay in Seoul, she said. I want to continue my fellowship. I want to sleep somewhere that isn't my apartment for the next 3 weeks. And I want you to finish what you started 3 years ago. He was very still behind her. Amara. She turned around. I came here to do work that matters, she said. I am not leaving because a frightened, powerful man put a card in my locker. But I am also not stupid. So tell me what you need from me, and I will tell you what I need from you, and we will handle this as adults. He crossed the room. Not quickly. The measured, deliberate steps of a man making a considered decision. He stopped in front of her. Close. I need you to stay here, he said. For the 3 weeks. In this building. With security. And I can continue going to the hospital? With an escort. Discreet. Completely. And you will tell me everything that is happening. Not what you calculate I can handle. Everything. Yes, he said. Without hesitation. She looked up at him. Okay, she said. He reached up and very carefully, with the specific deliberateness of a man who is not casual about anything, brushed a loose strand of her natural hair back from her face. She went completely still. His hand dropped. I am going to protect you, he said. Whatever it takes. I know, she said. And I am going to trust you to do it without making me smaller in the process. His eyes held hers. I wouldn't know how to make you smaller, he said. I'm not certain it's possible. The next 12 days were the strangest and most concentrated of her life. She worked. She went to the hospital every morning with Park Sung-jin 3 steps behind her and returned to the penthouse every evening. She operated on 2 patients, reviewed data on 4 cases, and submitted the first section of her research paper to the journal that had been waiting for it for 3 months. He was there in the evenings. Not always. Sometimes he arrived at midnight or later with the controlled quietness of a man who had been doing things she understood the broad shape of and not the specific content. But he always came. And when he came, he ate the food she had started leaving out because his staff apparently considered feeding him a logistical problem, and she considered it a basic physiological requirement. They talked. Every evening. For hours. About everything. She told him about her first surgery. A coronary bypass on a man who was her attending's patient and who should have been straightforward and had not been, and the 6 hours during which she had understood for the first time with her hands rather than her brain what the work actually was. He told her about his wife. Her name was Jisoo. She had taught secondary school history. She had laughed loudly at her own jokes and had been completely terrible at directions and had made the specific kind of ordinary daily joy that you did not know was irreplaceable until it was gone. He said this without performance and without the careful emotional management she had watched him apply to everything else, and she understood that these were things he had not said out loud in 3 years and was saying now because something had finally shifted enough to make the saying possible. She listened without filling the silence. On the 9th evening, he found her in the kitchen of the penthouse at 11 p.m. because she could not sleep and had decided that was a problem best addressed with the specific Nigerian pepper soup recipe her mother had sent her last week, which required chili peppers at a heat level that the building staff had politely suggested was inadvisable. She was dancing again. She had not planned to. The playlist was running and the kitchen was empty and her hands were busy with the chili peppers and her body had made its own decision. She became aware of him in the doorway. She did not stop this time. She looked at him over her shoulder. There's a second apron, she said. He came into the kitchen. He did not dance. But he stood beside her and listened while she told him what went into the pepper soup, and he handed her things when she needed them, and somewhere around midnight when the soup was finished, and they were sitting at the kitchen counter eating it with tears streaming from both their eyes because she had not in fact moderated the chili peppers, he started laughing. Not the small controlled almost thing from dinner. The real thing. She turned and looked at him, and the sound of it was enormous in the quiet penthouse kitchen, and she felt something in her chest expand like a room gaining light. It's very hot, he managed. I know, she said. It's supposed to be. This is assault, he said. It's also very good. Yes, he agreed. Through tears. It is. She was smiling so hard her face hurt. He looked at her. Thank you, he said. She knew he was not talking about the soup. You should have been doing that the whole time, she said. The laughing. All of it. The eating. The talking. The being in a kitchen at midnight. She looked at him. You've been living in a siege state for 3 years. Your body has been paying the bill. I know. Jisoo wouldn't have wanted that. The name sat between them. Not painfully. In the specific way of something that was being carried correctly for the first time. No, he said. She wouldn't have. She reached across the counter and put her hand over his. He looked down at it. Then he turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that in the kitchen with the pepper soup going cold and Seoul outside the windows and 3 years of a siege finally, slowly, beginning to lift. The filing happened on day 14. Hyun-Seok's legal team submitted the case documentation to the prosecutor's office at 9 a.m. Simultaneously, a package of corroborating evidence arrived at 3 separate investigative journalists. Simultaneously, the board of Seoul Medical Center received an anonymous detailed account of Han Chol-soo's involvement in the arranged death of a civilian 3 years prior, together with 2 years of financial records documenting the subsequent cover-up. By noon, Han Chol-soo's personal attorney had called 3 times. By 2 p.m., the prosecutor's office had confirmed receipt and opened a preliminary inquiry. By 4 p.m., 2 of the 3 men had gone very quiet in ways that their organization's communications patterns suggested were the specific quiet of people consulting lawyers rather than the quiet of people who felt safe. Hyun-Seok told her all of this. In real time. As it happened. She was in surgery for the first part of the morning, a complex valve replacement on a 63-year-old woman that required 4 hours of concentration so absolute that the rest of the world genuinely did not exist. And she came out of the OR at 12:30 and found 3 messages from him and read them in the scrub room, still in her surgical gown. She called him. It's moving, he said. I know. I read your messages. The 3rd man is Song Tae-il. He's the one I've been most concerned about. He's less methodical than Han. More reactive. Meaning when cornered he tends toward action rather than strategy. She understood what that meant. How long? Park is managing the exposure points. I need 24 hours. I'll be here. Amara. A pause. Go back to the hospital. Finish your work. Park will be with you. But I want you to have a normal afternoon. Dear rounds. Eat something. Be exactly who you are. She stood in the scrub room. Are you telling me that because it's operationally sound or because you need me to be okay? A pause. Both, he said honestly. Okay, she said. She went back. She did her rounds. She reviewed her research data. She ate a sandwich at her desk and texted him a photograph of it because he had mentioned the previous evening that she frequently forgot lunch, and she wanted him to know she had not forgotten. He sent back one word. Good. She smiled at her phone in a way her colleague walking past clearly registered and equally clearly chose not to comment on. At 4:50 p.m. Park Sung-jin appeared at her office door. Dr. Mensah, he said. His face had the specific quality it had on the day he had come to collect her from the hospital, the tight professional control of someone managing an elevated situation. We need to leave now. What happened? Song Tae-il's people have been in the building. She stood immediately. Not a threat yet, Park said, but the parameters have changed. Mr. Kang has asked me to bring you to him directly. Lead the way, she said. She was already moving. The location Hyun-Seok had moved to was not the Gangnam penthouse. It was a building in Yeongdeungpo that she had not been to, a floor in a commercial tower that had been gutted and rebuilt into something that was simultaneously a war room and a residence. The specific functional aesthetics of a space that existed for strategy rather than comfort. He was at a central table with 4 people she recognized as his senior people and 2 she did not, and the controlled operational precision of the room made the hairs rise on the back of her neck in a way that was entirely informational rather than fear. He looked up when she entered. Everything about him was in the version she had seen once before during the phone call, stripped back to operational precision. But when his eyes found her face, something in them shifted from cold to present in a way that was visible and that several of the people in the room very deliberately did not notice. Are you all right? He said. Fine. Park was thorough. She looked at the table, at the maps and the communication printouts and the specific architecture of something coming to resolution. What's happening? He told her. Song Tae-il had made a decision. The simultaneous nature of the legal filing and the media package had apparently convinced him that the measured approach was no longer available, and he had shifted to the reactive mode that Hyun-Seok had predicted. 2 of his people had entered Seoul Medical Center through the research department's visitor access. They had not done anything. They had been seen and documented and had left. The message was clear. They knew where she worked and they could reach her there. Hyun-Seok's people had spent the afternoon closing the access point. The 2 individuals had been identified and were being handled through channels she understood broadly and did not need the specific details of. Song himself? She asked. Being managed, he said. By morning this is resolved. The legal machinery is moving, and once it moves at this scale it cannot be stopped. Song knows this. He is making noise because noise is all he has left. She looked at him. And Han? Han has stopped answering his attorney's calls and started answering his passport. He's running. Attempting to. There are people in the way of that. She sat down at the table. He looked at her sitting down at his table in his operational space, and something in his expression registered it. You don't have to be here for this part, he said. I know, she said. I'm here because I want to be. One of the people at the table she did not know looked at her and then at Hyun-Seok with the specific expression of someone recalibrating a prior assumption. Good, Hyun-Seok said quietly. He went back to work. She stayed at the table. And for the next 6 hours she watched Kang Hyun-Seok finish the thing he had been building toward for 3 years with the complete comprehensive precision of someone who had thought about nothing else for 1,097 days and had not gotten a single calculation wrong. At 3 a.m., the prosecutor's office issued a statement. At 4 a.m., Han Chol-soo was detained at Incheon Airport. At 5 a.m., Song Tae-il's attorney issued a statement indicating his client would be cooperating with the investigation. At 5:17 a.m., the last of the 4 people at the table received confirmation of the third man's decision and reported it to Hyun-Seok, who received it without visible expression and stood very still for approximately 10 seconds. Then he sat down. He sat down in the chair at the head of the table and put both hands flat on the surface and looked at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows that were starting to show the first pale suggestion of dawn. Everyone else in the room found somewhere else to be very quickly. Amara was still at the table. She got up and walked around to where he was sitting. She put her hand on his shoulder. He reached up and covered her hand with his. They stayed like that while Seoul began to wake up outside the windows and the 3 years pressed into every line of him began, finally, to release. It's done, she said quietly. Yes, he said. How do you feel? He was quiet for a long moment. Empty, he said. And then. He turned and looked up at her. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, he said. I have spent 3 years knowing exactly what I was supposed to do next. And now I don't. She looked at him. At the face that had carried 3 years of a siege and had just set it down. At the man who had told her the truth at dinner before anything started and had kept telling the truth every day since. At the specific quality of the dawn light on his face and what it revealed that the controlled professional presentation usually concealed. I have a suggestion, she said. Yes. Go to sleep, she said. For approximately 8 to 10 hours. Eat something that isn't from a building with a war room in it. And then tomorrow, when you are rested and fed and operating with a full clinical picture of your own situation, you will find that what you're supposed to do next is considerably clearer. He looked at her. That is the most practical thing anyone has ever said to me in a moment of personal significance, he said. I'm a doctor, she said. Practical is my primary register. Is it? Usually, she said. Sometimes it's dancing in empty corridors. He stood up. He was close. Very close. Amara, he said. Yes. I would like to ask you something. Ask. I would like to take you to dinner again, he said. Not once. Repeatedly. On an ongoing basis. With the full understanding that I am significantly more complicated than a man you met in a hospital and significantly less frightening than the last 3 weeks might suggest, and that whatever this is, I would like to find out what it can become. She looked at him. That is a very thorough dinner invitation, she said. I practice what I say. I know you do. She was quiet for a moment. Hyun-Seok, she said. I came to Seoul to do work that matters. I have done that. I'm going to keep doing it. But I also came here not knowing whether Seoul was going to feel like home. And it didn't. She held his gaze. Until very recently. He held her gaze. Is that a yes? He said. She smiled. That is a yes, she said. The dawn was fully arriving now through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul catching the first real light of the morning, the city beginning the ordinary motion of a day that had no idea what had resolved inside this building while it slept. He looked at her in the dawn light. And smiled. The real one. The one that had been kept for 3 years and had been given back to him in a hospital corridor by a woman who had been dancing because she thought no one was watching. She watched it cross his face and felt something in her chest that was large and warm and entirely unmanageable. I'm going to make you breakfast, she said. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. She was already walking toward the small kitchen at the edge of the space. You need to eat before you sleep. Basic physiology. Non-negotiable. Dr. Mensah, he said. Yes. Do you know any songs better than Oh My God by Sierra? She turned around. I know hundreds, she said. Will you play one while you cook? She looked at him in the dawn light, standing in his operational war room that was no longer operational, 3 years of weight finally gone from his face, asking her to play music while she made him breakfast. She put her earbud in. She pressed play. And she danced. Completely and without apology and with the specific uninhibited joy of someone who believed entirely that this time, for the first time in a very long time, the corridor was not empty. He watched her. And he smiled. And that is where we leave them. The most dangerous man in Seoul standing in a room full of dawn light watching his doctor dance in his kitchen and smiling for the first time in 3 years like a man who has remembered that the world has warmth in it. He spent 1,097 days carrying a war. She gave him back the morning in 12 days. Part 2 is coming. And what happens when the world finds out about them is a story that is going to be even bigger than this one. Subscribe right now. Turn on that bell. Hit the like button if this story reached you somewhere real today. And drop a comment below. What was your moment? Was it the corridor? The pepper soup at midnight? The dawn? Because I want to know. I read every comment and I will see you in part 2.